this time we are talking about the Jamstack and our upcoming book,
Yeah.
the Jamstack book, which is available now in MEEP, then early access. So we've got, I think, how many chapters are in there now? Like 6, 5 or
Yeah, I
6.
believe so. I'm looking at it
Um,
right now.
yeah, I think my chapter
4.
is close to getting in there. My last one, and then
Yeah.
we're getting there.
It's just
So
4 right now. I'm looking at the page now, but it should be updated really soon.
yeah, so yeah, obviously we'd love you to check out the book, but we're here to talk about what the heck is the Jamstack. So I guess we'll start with you had a good. I mean, I would. Oh, okay. Let's set a base.
I spent so much time on this outline to make it easier
I
for
think your definition you gave the other day is great because I think it leads into a discussion of like how we've usually defined Jamstack and how I think
Yeah.
we should define Jamstack now. So you go ahead. You remember that definition? Do you have that handy? The definition you shared with me the other day of that you
I
used to
do.
describe Jamstack. Yeah.
But Brian, would you like to introduce yourself first to
Oh yes, that would be smart.
So
That
I
would be
just want to
smart.
point out, I am the least organized person in the world, but for
Mm.
this stream, I wrote an outline. Like I did the organization, and Brian's totally, totally ignoring it.
I am completely ignoring it. Sorry.
But
All right.
Brian, tell me
So
about yourself.
my name is Brian Rinaldi. I am a developer advocate with StepZen, which we are a service to help you create your GraphQL API backend that you can connect to like any databases, REST APIs, and so on. And I've been doing Jamstack stuff since about 2013-ish. We didn't call it Jamstack then. It was just static sites. I used FTP to upload things. And so it was kind of old school. But yeah, so that's me.
I am Raymond Camden. I currently, as of today, I am a developer advocate for Here Technologies. We are a location for the developers, so APIs for mapping, geolocation, routing, stuff like that. I haven't actually said this publicly on Twitter, but I will be leaving here at the end of this week and starting a new gig for Censored. I'll be
Yeah.
announcing that in a couple
There.
of days. It's
So
not.
you're leaving here and going there. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm leaving. That's a great way to say it. It's not that terribly exciting. I'm not like joining the CIA or something. But I don't have, I don't have enough excitement in my life. So let me hold on to my new gig as like a big announcement for next week.
All right.
Oh, and I've been using the Jamstack about the exact same time frame, 2013. I had spent many years using an application server called Cold Fusion, and made a good career out of building Cold Fusion sites and talking about Cold Fusion. And started looking at started looking at static sites when I realized I had approximately $5,000 worth of servers running a site that got updated about once a year or so, and that may have been overkill. So static sites back then were very appealing to me to just reduce the amount of stuff that I was running for absolutely no need whatsoever.
Yep. Yep. I know the feeling. I kind of was drawn to it by I was doing WordPress for something at the time. I really didn't, for a number of reasons, didn't want to use WordPress. Part of it was even political internally inside the company. So I wanted to use Jekyll. In the end, I was overridden and didn't get to use Jekyll. But I did. That started my fascination. I started doing all kinds of stuff against that. It's like, you're not going to tell me no. Just you watch. Back then, they all used to make fun of me because they're like, this stuff is not going anywhere. I'm like, this is the future. And well, I won't say I have been proven completely right, but more right than not on that topic. So Anyway,
Sorry, I
so
had like a panic. I thought a kid was coming up. Uh, Something came up the stairs. They haven't come into the office, so I'm all good.
so back to the topic at hand. What the heck is? I've got a mouthful of boba.
I
What the
hate
heck is a Jamstack?
I
Let's
hate
go.
boba.
Let's yeah. You hate
Uh,
boba? Okay. Okay.
boba.
Don't.
Let
That,
me so yeah, so I wrote up a good thing for a slide, and where is that? I want to make sure I quote myself right because as soon as I wrote it, I forgot. Uh,
mhm.
but the way that I described it, and this, so I think first off, it bears mentioning like why we got Jamstack because it used to be just called static sites, right?
Yes.
Like we just
Right.
call it static sites, and I know in my experience, I was doing presentations on it all the time, and it was always at static sites, yes, and could do X, Y, and Z with it, so it's not really static. So I was kind of happy that we came up with a new marketing term just to set the context right and kind of get rid of preconceived notions and stuff like
Right.
that. Uh,
Absolutely.
Even though I fought the term at first, that
Yes, I
was
remember that.
that was younger Ray. I'm much older now, much more
Yeah.
wiser.
You had
Uh,
less beard back then.
had less beard back then. So the way that I describe or the way I define Jamstack as of like 3 days ago when I wrote this slide deck is a way of building sites that relies on pre-rendered dynamic content living in production as static assets enhanced with client-side JavaScripts and APIs for interactivity.
Yeah.
So,
And one of the things I love about that definition is because most people, when they start looking at what is the Jamstack, they go to, they go read and they're like, okay, well, Jam stands for JavaScript APIs and markup, and then that's usually where the definition kind of starts and ends in many ways, right? It's like, well, okay, my website uses JavaScript APIs and markup, right? Like, so I'm already doing Jamstack, aren't I? And but that's I think what your definition differs is the mention of pre-rendering, which is a key element in what makes something Jamstack, right? Which is basically, that the majority of the content and the pages are going to be rendered at build time. Um, and then enhanced for interactivity and personalization or any other kind of features with APIs in JavaScript. And the other thing is those APIs can live either can be called either on client side, right, with JavaScript, or at build time, right, with whatever tool you're using, which is something that is often lost in that whole interpretation of Jam as JavaScript APIs and markup is that the build time, the APIs can be a part of the build time. In fact,
mm,
that's probably where the majority of my API work
mm,
ends up getting done is at build time, not at client side,
mm.
right? I don't know what you think on that topic.
Yeah, no, there is this whole idea of yes, we can have interactivity, but there's multiple different places where that can live, and so much depends on your data. So I'm working on a site now. I think it's a great example of this. It's a site that sells products, and I generate the products at build time, and I do that because they're going to be adding a product like once a month, or editing a product every now and then. I'm totally fine with doing a whole new build for that. But, you know, this product has like 8 different properties, and 2 of them are very dynamic. There are a number of things sold and number of days left or something like that. So I actually do a mix of stuff where when the site is built, I get the products, I get the names and stuff like that. When the user actually hits the site in production, I use client-side JavaScript. I call a serverless function that gets the up-to-date parts of that product that need to be essentially gotten at that very second. Um, and I could have done it a third way as well. I could have done the entire thing on the client side, right? I could have used a Vue application, React, or whatever, and just gotten all the products and everything dynamically. But I felt that was too much. So we have all these different options and different ways of building things. It's funny. So I saw someone I can't remember his name, talking about static sites like 4 or 5 years ago, and he made a great point. Is that it's one of the things you see in this type of way of building sites is that the complexity has moved from production to your local system. So you're not necessarily making things simpler. Like my blog is fairly complex, but it's complex on my laptop. And when it goes into production, it's dumb files for the most part. So you still may have the same level of complexity, the same amount of thinking to go into to build the final project. But I love that, like, once I deploy my site, there's not very many things that I have to be concerned about because it's 99% flat files.
Right. In your blog, you use 11D, right?
Yeah, well, I went from like my custom blogware with Cold Fusion. I ran that for a very long time, and it was fine. But I after 10 years, I just got tired of it, and I switched to WordPress, and I love that authoring experience. Like it was just a pleasure to write in WordPress. It was not a pleasure to run WordPress. Uh,
Right.
I I mean, so my site gets good traffic, but not like heavy traffic, and I was shocked how fragile uh, WordPress was out of the box. Like basic caching and stuff was just turned off, and I get that they were maybe being conservative in terms of what they want the out of the box experience to be, but for mediumish traffic to just crash and burn WordPress unless I spent hours tweaking it was really a big turnoff for me. It didn't make up for how pleasurable the authoring experience was.
Yep. Well, and it's important to point out for people listening that it's not the Jamstack is not like just about blogs,
Yeah.
and it's not just about file-based content. We can do that, and in many cases, that's kind of where people get their start, right?
Mhm.
But like if you need that editing experience, there's a whole ecosystem of tools now that give you that editing experience. All these headless CMSs that have varying different degrees of like how I guess varying editing experiences, and you can kind of there's so many of them. You can find one that suits you. There's even like nowadays a lot of them even have live preview and things like that.
Mhm.
So some of those features that for a while we were when compared against WordPress, it was like okay, you're missing this and missing that and whatever, and we argue that the security of Jamstack and the speed of Jamstack and things like that were worth the trade-offs in terms of the editing experience, right? I think that that's not necessarily the case nowadays, which is one of the reasons why I'm really glad we're writing this book now, because I feel like there's a much better case, much stronger case to be made for what you can do with Jamstack. So
And we should, before we start talking more code and stuff, we should definitely point out that yes, we are writing a book. we
yeah,
we are
I
writing.
mentioned it already.
Did you? All right. Well, I'll mention it again. We're writing the Jamstack book, and I understand that people will go to sessions like this and then leave halfway through. If you decide to leave, I want you to leave with a code that we have that I am looking up because I didn't memorize it. And that code is oddly named TWITRINA40, TWITRINA 40. And when I share my screen in a few minutes, I'll actually put it in a blank editor file so you can see it big and easy. But that is 40% off the Meep. And if this is your first time ever hearing about a Manning Meep thing, that is essentially a beta version of our book, an incomplete version. If you buy it now, you absolutely get the full complete book. The benefit of having it now is that as we release new chapters, you can provide feedback, and then you obviously get the new versions as typos or fix and things like that. You get those as well.
Yep. And so one of the things I think, like moving kind of, because I know people we could sit here and talk the theory of Jamstack and what is Jamstack all day. People, particularly if you're watching on Twitch, you like to see some code, right? So What Ray and I are going to show today, I think, illustrates kind of the how our approach to the book, which is that the Jamstack is not prescriptive. It's not
Mm,
really a stack in the typical sense where you have a set of technologies that you are, oh, and if I use lamp, it's
mm,
it actually stands for the tools that you need to use to use that right stack. So Jamstack is more of a methodology,
mm,
and one of the great things about that methodology is that it has, like, you have basically any tool that you can kind of fit your needs, right? Like if you like Ruby, or there's tools like Jekyll. If you like Go, there's tools like Hugo. If you like, you know, JavaScript, there's like 1,000 JavaScript, based static site generators, and that goes even beyond that. Like when you get into headless CMS, when you get into um, headless e-commerce, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's like you have a lot of options, and you can build the stack essentially that works for you.
mm.
So the book kind of takes, like, okay, we're going to talk about different types of sites and use different tools to kind of give you a flavor of what's out there. So today we're going to do that too, a little bit.
Yeah,
So I think you were up first with,
yeah.
you were going to show, just to kind of give people a sense of how this actually works. We're not going to build anything terribly complex, but we're going to go through a few different options so you can see what it feels like to build a site using these tools.
Absolutely. All right. So, and we're sharing
Oh
screen.
yeah, we're going to show that code or something there or something.
Yeah. So this is the website,
Hmm.
manning.com/books/the Jamstack book, as in we have the book, the only book you should ever buy for the rest of your life. And that code, give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to copy that into my editor and make it very readable. It is
There we
right.
go.
Twitrina 40. And
Twitterina 40.
I'm not going to stay on this page forever, but you can
Uh,
definitely ask on chat if you need it later. Both Brian and I are on Twitter, and you can reach out to us as well. You should
yep.
absolutely follow me. I'm not so sure about Brian, uh, but you should definitely follow me, and I could share that with you if you need a copy of it. So the way that I'm gonna talk about Jamstack, the example that I'm gonna use is a engine called 11. This is the third or fourth static site generator that I've used over the last 7 or so years, and it's absolutely my favorite right now. I go back and forth. Previously, I was really big on Jekyll. Still like Jekyll. I don't like the Ruby uh, dependencies, especially on Windows. And before that, I was on Hugo, and that's all I'll say about Hugo. 11 just really clicked for me, and I think one of the things that Brian and I say uh, quite a lot in our book is that uh, this is a way to achieve a goal, and if you don't like this particular way of doing it, that's okay because you have other options. Just like I prefer Vue over React, I know that React and Vue can do the exact same things, but I've seen React. It doesn't click with me. Vue clicks with me a lot better. 11 when I first started using it, just hit all the check marks for me. It is node based, so there's nothing weird for that in my operating system. Node just works. I could do an npm install to work with it, and it's also extremely flexible. So I have found um, some of the options out there are a bit more strict in terms of how you use them. For example, there was one I was using in the past where I needed to output something that wasn't HTML. I needed to output some basic JSON, and the engine made it incredibly hard to do that. It's gotten better since then, but at the time, it was very frustrating. 11 is, basically do whatever you want, do it any way you want. I don't care, just make it work. And for some people, that's great, and I'm one of those people
Yeah.
that may not be how you feel about it. But The website is 11y11ty.dev. It is hard to type. I do screw it up all the time, but I
Hmm.
still love it. npm install dash g, etc. 11y/11y. And what I'm going to do is for the next 8 minutes or so, show just a few quick, simple examples of working with it. I will say, if you're intrigued by it, definitely feel free to reach out for me for questions. And on my own blog, which is run on 11y, I have a few posts about 11y. I think about 30 or 40 or so far. But
Yeah.
so all I'm going to
So
do,
one
yes.
of the things I was going to mention is just as like a second opinion on levity, my limited experience, because you brought it up, is that some static site generators are very prescriptive about how you do things, right? And then some, and 11D is one that's like basically not prescriptive as far as I can, and my limited experience with it, about anything. You just do things the way you feel like doing them, and it kind of gives you the tools to do that.
Mm.
Whereas like other tools say, okay, you have to put, like Jekyll, you have to put posts in this folder, and you have to put this and that folder, et cetera, right? Like 11 is just like, for largely like do things the way you like to do them, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and again, I appreciate that. So, one thing you find common amongst every static site generator is that it will use some type of HTML meta language, some kind of a template language. So, Jekyll, for example, will use Liquid. Hugo uses its own thing, right?
It uses a Go templating language.
Yeah. So, they all have their own syntax, and they're all, they have pluses and minuses. 11e ships with 11 different ways, 11 different template languages. And what's cool is that, I came to 11e from Jekyll. So I knew Liquid, I liked Liquid, 11e supports it. Uh, but the fact that 11e allows me to use other ones, I had specific use cases where Liquid wasn't flexible enough, and I just switched to EJS. Now, I don't like EJS. It looks like classic ASP, but it's also extremely flexible in terms of what code you write in your template. So, on the one part of my blog where Liquid just wouldn't work right, I just switched to EJS for that file and got what I needed done and just moved on. Let me show a quick, simple example. I've made a new directory, and I'm going to go ahead and switch to my editor and not try to type in, not do like VI or anything like that. I'm not that much of a hacker. Make this a little bit smaller. So I'm going to start off with just a index.md file, a markdown file. Hello world. And yes, I bought a new keyboard that's super loud. I apologize. I am sorry for the clacking. I believe that's how you say it. So I start off with just one simple markdown file. And by default, if I just run 11e, it's going to process that file, run really, really quick because there's a grand total of one thing to do. And essentially output that in a underscore site folder, which will be the output for my static site generator. I had one file, so it made one HTML file. And at this point, I have a overpowered markdown converter, which is not terribly exciting. But there's a couple of things that I could do to start making this a bit more powerful. So one of the first things that I like to do with a static site generator is start working with a layout. This is something that I did back in my app server days. So in my Cold Fusion days, I always had a layout file, and then all of my particular files on my site would just include that. That made it easy to change UI headers, the all-important copyright year at the bottom, and stuff like that. So in 11e, I can make a new folder, call it underscore includes, and you can configure all of this, but I
Can you
typically
make it a bit bigger, Ray?
make that what bigger?
Yeah.
Make what bigger?
Just your code editor. It's hard to
No,
see.
I can't. I refuse to. Uh, there we go. How's that?
Yeah. Better. Yeah. Thank
All
you.
right. So I mentioned that 11e lets you use multiple different template engines. Again, I like Liquid, so I'm going to make a file called main.liquid, and I'm going to do some basic HTML, and I'll do this super fast and super ugly with proper semantic HTML. I forgot my doc type. I apologize. And just to show that this is working, I'll put a header up here, my site, and a footer. Copyright. What year is this? Everything is so weird now. It's still 2020, right? There's no way it's 2021. I put a footer in there, and if you've never seen Liquid before, you can do squiggly content. And basically what's going to happen now is I'm going to tell my site, I'm going to tell my file to use this as a layout file. And when 11e takes that markdown, it's going to drop it into a variable inside that content block right there. And the way we do this, and again, this is pretty standard amongst most stack-side generators, is write a bit of front matter, say layout main, and I'll go ahead and add a title.
Yeah.
Awesome. Homepage.
For those people who like have not encountered front matter before, because we use that term a lot, and I think it's not always self-explanatory. It's basically metadata that's at the beginning of, well, usually of markdown files, but in a lot of engines they actually recognize it in any file. So it's typically YAML, but I've seen it also, some engines support it in TOML or even in JSON. So, yep. And as you can see, you've now put it in your Liquid file as well. So,
yeah, I'm not a fan of YAML. I find it very picky, but for simple key value pairs like this, it works good enough. Once you start getting complex and doing arrays and stuff like that, it just drives me batty. But so all I've done here is in my markdown file, essentially added that metadata that 11e is going to pick up. I told it a layout. I told it a title. The title is just a page variable that my layout file can pick up on. I set a default in my layout. I'm just outputting it there. And in theory now, if I run it again, it will output the HTML again, and now I actually have full layout. Now, typically, I'm not going to write some markdown, write some Liquid, run 11e, and look at the output in HTML. Instead, I'm going to fire up a server, which 11e supports with 11e-serve. And this will start watching my files, fire up a server, and I can go to localhost 8080 and see my wonderful site. Now, if I actually go in here, make this a little bit smaller so you can see both. If I start styling, and I am where style goes to die, but I'm going to add a lovely background color, show you a feature. Oh, it was supposed to. So 11.
You're editing the index HTML that it generated. Yeah. I was like, wow, no, this is some new feature that I wasn't aware of.
I have never done that before. All right, I'll save it in my Liquid file. 11e picked up that the file changed, automatically reloaded. This is a feature of 11e. It doesn't kick in until you have a real HTML file. So until I actually have an HTML and a head and a body. But typically, most sites will have that. But as I work here, I can start, modifying things. And again, this is why I don't design. That's not even valid, I think. But again, you get that kind of live reload, live experience. I want to show two more quick features. If I want to start making this a bit dynamic. So again, coming from the app server world, I would do things like the admin contact email as a variable. That way I could change it to somebody else. 11e supports a feature called data files. By default, it's in a folder called _data. And I could drop a JSON file in here, and I'll call it site.json. And I will write valid JSON email is email Brian with your problems at he can handle it. Not really a valid email address, but I'll go with it. And what's nice is that 11e now has picked this up. It has created a variable that I could use called site, and it's an object. So site.email will be this value. So if I were to say in my footer, email us at site.email. I can save this and we could see if I move stuff out of the way, there is that address. So what's cool is that like something like that would change maybe once or twice a year, whoever's taking care of her email. But I could edit that in my data file that gets applied to my layout. All of the files on my site are using it, and I'm still just outputting basic HTML flat files.
Does it support like just JSON data files, or is it
It
JSON,
does
YAML,
It
TOML,
does
all
not.
that stuff?
I'm gonna copy some logic here real quick. So if I actually use a JS file, I can use JavaScript. So I'm gonna call this
Oh,
films.js,
that's cool.
and I'm gonna use some node code to hit the Star Wars API. I'm using fetch, and I'm hitting the API to get the films. I'm gonna save this, and I'm gonna come back and kill my server and actually install node fetch. Levity won't just helps if I actually install it. Let this run the server again, and don't crash. Great. So I'm going to go into my index.markdown file, definitely not my HTML, and do a bit of logic. Actually, I'm going to do this. This is why you don't type live. I'm going to make a new file called films.liquid and copy the front matter. And I swear I'll be done soon, Brian, so you could show how you do it in your generator, which will be much slower, right? Not as cool as mine. Star Wars films. So I have a liquid file. I'm going to write a bit of logic here. Say for film and films and film.title and for, and don't crash. Yes. All right. And now if I open up my films page, so it may not be apparently obvious what happened here, but Levity took that JavaScript file and ran it. That file called a remote API. In this case, this one to get Star Wars film. I was then able to write a little bit of logic back in here using Liquid to essentially iterate over that data. Where it came from, this file doesn't care. So if I needed static data, I could have done that as well. But right now, it just works. When I generate this output, I have, again, a flat HTML file. In my case, I'm working with Star Wars movies. They come out once every couple of years. So if I needed to, I could schedule a build of my site every day or every month or whenever that makes sense. I was talking earlier about the fact that I'm working on a site now where we do a new product maybe once a month. So I'm using logic a bit like this. It will not automatically update when a new product is released, but I could absolutely automate that or even do a simple schedule-based system.
Right.
So that is 11. There's a heck of a lot more that's in here. I recommend looking into docs. 11 does pagination very easily as well, where if I wanted a page for each film, I could do that and more. I'm a huge fan. Definitely check it out. But I want to give Brian a chance to speak because I went on way too long.
Not a problem. It was good stuff. And I think the way 11 handles data files is actually really cool and really powerful. And to your point, because what we're showing here, since it's very early, it's just very staticky stuff. So like this isn't it is really just static sites right now, not Jamstack, because we're not adding in any of the interactivity, although you are pulling in an API, which is kind of part of that. But you can absolutely have it so that your site, if something changes, automatically triggers a new build and so on, even if that something is sitting there on an external API. So this is typically how like even a headless CMS that is like an API-based headless CMS, like a Contentful or a Sanity, if somebody changes something there, it's going to trigger a new build and so on. So that's like, super powerful stuff, because what it doesn't mean like, it's just if you have a site that only updates it once a month. I mean, you could have a site that updates repeatedly throughout the day, and that build gets triggered. And even now, most of these tools have incremental builds, so that it's not even a big deal for the build to run, right? Because it's only gonna change what only going to rebuild the pieces that have changed. So this is where like it becomes kind of like a lot more powerful and not your traditional like, okay, build process that we used to go through, where it's just, you know, run through this build and I used to recommend people like, oh, if your site updates multiple times a day, it's probably not a great option for you. And now it's like, no, it's a great option. We have sites that update all the time, you know, continuously, and that's fine, you know. So they're still sharing your screen. Hopefully somebody will go ahead and switch to my screen. Yes, there we go. Okay. So we're going to run through a couple of my favorites real quick. I'm mostly going to kind of show you how to get started with them. So Hugo is one that I'm only putting this because Ray's such a huge fan of Hugo. So I am actually a really big fan of Hugo. I've been using it for a long time. So just like Ray, I got my start with Jekyll, and I used a bunch of tools, and then kind of fell in love with Hugo. Hugo is built on Go. So one of the things about Hugo that I find often hard to get used to when I use other tools is it's blazing fast. And I mean, I have sites that have, you know, just a lot of pages. Like I run a site called cfe.dev on this, and that site actually has a ton of pages. It's not even often obvious when you get to the site how many pages are sitting there back there, but it's milliseconds how long it takes to build the site. So it's blazing fast at that, which is one of the benefits that I enjoy. So you can find it at gohugo.io. The installation is a little bit different because it's either a binary or you can use why am I blanking on how you install it?
I don't remember.
So,
in a while.
So
I will say,
it's Homebrew. I use Homebrew to typically to install it, or you can actually just pull the binary, but you have to then put it on your path in order to get this to work.
I was just going to say, talking about speed, I think when I did my last test, 6,000 pages was less than a minute easily, which was really impressive.
Yeah, so like it is a great option if you have an enormous site that is kind of, you know, that the build performance is important. Again, looking at some of the other tools now with incremental regeneration, it probably plays less of a role, but some tools can still take a little while to run the build. And if you have a massive site, like if you had an e-commerce site with thousands of products, for instance, it could be a useful tool. And plus, I really like it. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to actually, let me clear this out. Okay, so I'm going to make a new project. Hold on. So I'm going to make a Hugo new site. This is how you create a new project once you've installed Hugo. And I'm just going to call mine Hugo Food.
Can you make your code a bit bigger?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I gave you a hard time and then I made it. How's that? Good?
That's better. Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So as you saw, like that was really, really quick. And it spit out the code for my site. But unlike one of the interesting things about Hugo that's different from say other tools, why didn't it open? Oh, because I need to go into the right project. CD Hugo Food. Oh, not Hugo Hugo Food. Okay, there we go. So this is what it creates here. We've got the basic site, and I'll make that bigger too. Too big. Is that good?
Yep.
Okay, so one of the interesting things about Hugo is when you generate a site, like I couldn't run this right now, it'd basically be an empty site because there is not much in here. It just kind of sets up essentially the structure for your site. But there's really nothing here. Not even some sites automatically like will generate some basic content for you and things like that. Hugo just kind of comes with the structure. And then you're going to have to go ahead and start working to make it output anything, kind of like you did a little bit in 11, right? But like tools like Jekyll, for instance, when you do this, you get a basic site, and then you just start editing, right?
Yeah.
So what we're going to do here next is we're actually going to go ahead, and there's a whole bunch of themes that you can. So you can either create your own theme, or you can create layouts, which instead of creating a theme. The easiest way to get started would be to go ahead and pick a theme, and there's a lot of themes. And so when Hugo has been around for a while, it's got a really big user community. So there's a ton of themes that you can use. Some of them are actually quite nice. So I picked one. Let's see. I'm just going to copy this because I don't remember the name as easily. So we're going to just clone this into here. Okay. So we now have a theme here. I'm going to open up my code. You'll see this theme here called Hugo Sustain. So this theme is now installed. I can actually add multiple themes and configure Hugo to like switch themes and things like that, but kind of like you would WordPress, but more manual. And it's got a bunch of layouts built by default. So like if you look at this, is kind of what Ray was talking about, the Go templating earlier in Hugo. It looks somewhat similar, I'd say, to Liquid when you were showing Liquid, right? With the curly braces and such. This is maybe not the easiest one to look at, but it takes a little bit of getting used to. I know you've used Hugo, so you could share your experiences, Ray. The syntax of how you write things is a little bit different than I was used to on other tools. You can see like, using their, how you use range, and then you have to use these dots. The dots here represent the context that you're in. So that is actually a really important Hugo concept that's hard to get a handle on. That because the context changes depending on where you are. So like as I'm looping through this range of data pages, the context of the dot here is actually the page that is current. The range is how you iterate through, and basically an array of items. So the dot here is my site, effectively, and the dot here is the page. So it's kind of hard to get too much into context here, but just to understand that this is kind of the quirkiness of Hugo templating and how context works within Hugo. It's a little hard to get a handle on. But once you do, one of the reasons I use it for so many sites is because it's super, super powerful. I can pretty much do anything I want in these templates. Don't listen to people who tell you it's difficult to do stuff in Hugo. I don't know who those people are, but they're wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and, rather than like write you out stuff here, we're going to just get this basic, simple template working. They actually have an example site in here. So I just need to copy out the content and stuff like that. So we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to paste it here because I'm cheating. Why am I not seeing paste? Show me paste, because I didn't copy. Copy. And then paste. I know I'm doing this. It's not copying. All right.
Deselect config.
Huh?
Like in the black space beneath it.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just ran through this. Damn it. Copy. Come on, code. Paste. There we go. All right, we're just going to move this way because it's being difficult and it's not doing things the way I want it to. So I'm going to dump this folder because it's empty anyway. There wasn't any content there, and that's just going to rename this. So this is my cheating way of getting your site up and running. So the content here, I just want to quickly show you. It's all just markdown. This has no front matter here. This is the same. So this one actually uses TOML front matter. If you're not used to TOML, it looks a lot like YAML. It just has a little bit of different syntax. So So you can have toml or YAML front matter inside your, your Hugo posts or anything, or any of the files. So that's what that looks like. Let's go ahead here, and I need to copy some more stuff out before this is going to work. We need the data folder. I'm going to copy that out and see if it actually works this time. Just paste. All right, I'm just going to do it that way again. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to delete this one. Sorry, I'm being slow at this. Come on.
It's always
Move
hard
to
to
try.
type live.
Huh?
It's always hard to type live.
Yes, it is. When you guys are not watching, I type perfectly. I never screw it up. Okay, so one other thing that, like, I think 11e probably has a similar kind of concept. So there is a special folder within Hugo called static. And the static folder is basically where you're going to place any of your assets and things like that that aren't going to get transformed. So in this case, I just have images that aren't going to get transformed, and I place them in that folder. So I think I have everything in there. Oh, and I need to copy. This is the Hugo configuration file. By default, it can be as simple as this. You can put whatever you want in there, though. So as you can see, this particular template has a whole bunch of extra stuff that they've put in there. So it has a whole bunch of sub. These are, I don't know what they call them in toml, but basically it's a way of structuring your data in here, so that it can be nicely organized, and we can kind of make a really complex configuration that gives a lot of detail to the site. We're not really going to edit that here. I just want to get this running. So much like 11e, you can do just Hugo serve, and this should work. Now I'm going to open my site at is a local host, not 3000, it's 1313. All right, so I've got my site working here. Everything, you can see, like, my blog is pulling. This is all written in Markdown. So it's converting all the Markdown. Just like in Ray's case, Hugo supports data files. So this is actually running off a data file. If we open that up here, I'm going to close this here. This is the data file. And I just use their data, their dummy data. This is just a YAML data file. Hugo does have the concept of pulling some data from an external source. It's not quite as flexible in that sense. It's one of maybe the weaknesses, in my opinion, of Hugo, is it's not as easy to say, like, hook it to an external source and pull all that data down in a way that you want to do that. So I often do that in different other ways, but you can use local data files just like that, and that's really easy. I know we were planning on only about an hour, so I did want to show one other thing before that isn't Hugo, because I think we both showed very traditional static site generators, right? Mm-hmm. Both of these were like your classic, it just spits out like Markdown, transform that Markdown, and it's more of like a traditional static site generator. There's no frameworks involved or anything like that. And I wanted to show an option for anybody interested in something that's more like uses a JavaScript framework on the front end, and the benefits of this are you get some of the flexibility like 11e, where you can easily pull data in and do some really interactive things. And if you have a highly interactive interface and you're or if you particularly love a framework like React or Vue or whatever, it can be a really good option to use something, one of these tools. So the one that I like, close this out, is called Next.js. It's really, really popular. So there's a lot I could tell you about Next.js. We could probably spend another hour just on Next.js. In fact, hours and hours. It's not, I would say the learning curve is a little steep, particularly if you're not experienced in React, which I am limited experience in React, but I know enough to be dangerous with Next.js. So there's couple cool things I want to point out about Next.js to begin with. As I mentioned, is based on React, obviously. The thing that is really neat is that it has the concept of both um, building server-side rendered apps. So basically, kind of a traditional Node.js application that renders on the server, or static application. So in this case, it becomes a static site generator, or it even has the concept of basically saying for this route, use static, for this route, use server-side rendering. So you can blend the two together and create this kind of hybrid Jamstack site that's both server rendered and static. So I'm just going to kind of quickly whip up a Next.js site. So in this case, we're going to say, call this one next foo. cd next foo. Right. So to do the way you create a Next.js app is not the same as you would any of these other tools where they're built into the command line. Actually, the best way to create a Next.js app is actually to use create next app, which you can use just using npx. You can actually, it'll run you through, if you just run create next app, it'll run you through creating the directory, the name, and so on and so forth. But since I'm already in here, I just run it with that dot, and it should run. So now it's going to go ahead and pull all the dependencies down and so on and so forth. It is going to generate me some code. It ran pretty quickly, so let's just take a quick look at this. This by default gives you something very, very simple. Again, just like Hugo did, it's the basics. It will actually run. So if I run, you can run either yarn dev or npm run dev. It doesn't really matter. Oh, didn't work. What did I get? Port 3000 already in use.
You still running
Did I kill Hugo? I thought I killed Hugo.
And that's 1313.
Oh yeah, that's true. I think I ran this before, and I'm. Oh, I know where it's running. Haha. Yes, I am running it. And let me see if I do this real quickly. Boom. Now I'm back. I was working on a Next.js site for work. There we go. Thank you for debugging with me. So here's localhost 3000. So this is the basic Next.js site. This is the only page in it. It's not really doing a heck of a lot, but just to kind of give you an overview, this is pages is where you put any of your pages. And essentially what Next.js does, which makes it really easy to work with React, in my opinion, is that any page I put in here, it becomes a root within my React application. So like index.js is obviously the home page, and that's what you're seeing there. But like if I were to create a page, about.js, then if I go to my site /about, that page would exist, right? And if you're familiar with React code, you'll kind of, this doesn't really do anything. Again, it's pretty basic. The other really cool thing about Next.js is it has this API folder where I can basically put the API, and any code that is the API for my application here. So it's really flexible and cool. And anything you put in that API folder, generally, like if you're using Next.js with the stuff on, what is it, they're next on Netlify, or you've deployed Versal, those get pushed as like cloud functions automatically, right? So I can access them like as serverless functions within my application here. It's really cool. The other thing I wanted to show really quickly is, and because we're running low on time, I won't demonstrate it. I had hoped to demonstrate it, but I built it off of this very simple, basic template. One of the amazing things to me is there is like a gigantic list of templates out there that you can use. So if you go to like Next.js on GitHub and you go to examples, I'm going to load that up. Every one of these is a template that I can use to basically build my site. So actually, I am going to quickly show you that just so you know how to do this because it's a really good way to get started. So I'm going to get out of here and I'm just gonna kill my next foo folder. And I'm going to make a new next foo.
Yeah. You could just done like next goo.
I know I could have, but
I know hard drive space on those Macs is probably kind of small.
then I'd have to remember another name. What's better than next foo, right? So next foo. No. Oops. I'm back to my wrong code here. All right. Okay. Clicking the wrong thing too. I'm gonna do this really quick using their blog starter. So I just tell it like which example I want to use, and then I can install that one, and it's gonna pull it for me, and it's gonna close that up. It's going to load all the dependencies just like before, but now I'm actually going to have something that resembles more of a complete site when I'm done. And I've used this for a bunch of projects, so it's really, really great because it gives you a really good starter, and there's almost everything in there that you ever want to use. What did I do? I don't know what's wrong with it. Oh,
So like,
maybe.
do a subdirectory, blog starter app,
Projects next to
CD blog starter app.
Oh, did it? I think that's what it did. Sorry. You're right. I'm such a dummy. I didn't need to put that. I just need to put the dot, and I just copied it wrong. Thank you.
Expert now.
Yeah, no. npm run dev. There we go. I wanted to. It wouldn't be a live coding session if I didn't screw a couple things up, right? And I'm not really even doing any coding. All I had to do was run some stupid commands, and I'm still failing. All right. It's loading very, very slowly initially. See, those of us used to Hugo, sometimes this drives me a little bit crazy, but there's my blog. This blog actually uses markdowns and markdown for the content and things like that. So that's the other interesting thing that's a little bit different, say, than almost any other static site generator is by default, Next.js does not know anything about markdown. You actually have to write the code to pull the markdown, but there are these samples out there that allow you to do this. So I would suggest like pretty much like anything, like if you want to use Sanity as your CMS, they've got an example using Sanity. If you want to use WordPress, they've got that. They've got almost any API or cookie auth using fauna auth and so on and so forth. It's all there. So I suggest kind of going through that and using one of those samples if you want to get started. It makes it really, really easy. So yeah,
I was gonna say so.
That's my amazing demo, huh?
Viable clan member. How to use cookies in Jamstack? I'll take a stab, and Brian, you could take a stab as well.
Okay.
If you're using client-side JavaScript can read and write cookies. So done. If you're talking about maybe the old app server way, where on my app server I want to create a cookie that gets sent to the browser, technically you could do that with a serverless function. So yes, that's how I would do it.
Yeah, I mean, every time I've done it, it's pretty much in JavaScript that runs on the client. I suppose I haven't run into a need to do it on a serverless function, but yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, you just write some code that writes a cookie. End of story. Yeah, it's not terribly difficult. Cool. So now have I convinced you, Ray, to use Next.js as your next static site generator? So he says his backend is api.app.blah.com, but the front end is app.blah.com. Oh, and so you're thinking about like is your issue writing a cookie for the other subdomain?
Yeah, but so the subdomain can make a cookie for the higher end domains. You got to make sure you set the host value for the cookie. I believe I haven't made cookies in probably 10 years. but I know that a cookie and a subdomain can create itself. I know, I'm 99% sure a cookie on a subdomain can be set such that it applies to the parent domain as well. I would say, if you're looking at tracking client side data, I would not use cookies. There's much nicer ways of doing that.
Yeah.
Cookies are getting really, really locked down by every browser out there.
Yeah, it's true. Um, use local storage, things like that to do a lot of that. But I mean, if you need to have a cookie, and like, I have done some, like actually the Next.js site that I was working on that was preventing me from doing this. We do set a cookie, and you know what the cookie is? The cookie is to tell us that you clicked OK on the cookie when pop up.
So,
Which is pretty much all I ever use cookies for anymore.
so you have a cookie prompt, and the only cookie you have is that you accepted the prompt. Why not just get rid of
Well, no, because most of the time the cookies are done by analytics and other stuff
yeah.
like that. It's not actually done by anything that I write. I don't write things that generally store anything as cookies. It's just that's, if you use like Google Analytics and things like that, a lot of it looks like it's going to be changing soon because it's getting more and more restrictive, and there's changes coming that may make it even more restrictive. So Ray's right, like avoid using cookies if you have to. But yeah, I mean, if you can avoid it. But yes, there's pretty much the way you do it in a Jamstack app is very similar to the way you do it in any other application. So cool. Well, if anybody has any other questions, we can hang around for a few more minutes. Feel free to pop them in the chat. Otherwise, I haven't convinced Ray to use Next.js. I know Ray, has a really strong affinity for Hugo, but it's not strong enough to overcome his Eleventy love. Next.js is the future. Yeah. I mean, look, it is really, really cool and very, very powerful. I tend to recommend. This is one of the things like that gets to why I love the Jamstack is I can use Next.js for a site where that is it, where I can utilize the features of a front end framework. And I could do a lot of really dynamic things even on the build. But I can also use Hugo for like something like CFE.dev that doesn't have the need for a front end framework and so on and so forth. So you choose the tools that fit what you want to build. And we have a whole array of tools in the Jamstack. So you don't have to, you can kind of switch tools. And I do switch tools. I mean, the two I showed are what I generally switch back and forth from. Hugo for things that don't need a front end framework, Next.js for things that do.
Cool.
Check out nx.dev, which is like Next.js, but for monorepos. Cool. I will check it out. Thank you, viable clan member. All right, Ray. Well, did you have anything to add?
I think I'm good.
Other than a cat? Yeah. I think we've pushed the limits of how long my dogs can go without going ballistic and getting on air. So I think we are ready to call it. I hope that we've shown you all something useful, and we really appreciate you joining us.
Yes,
and again, huh?
I was just saying thank you to everybody who came saw us. See us.
Yeah, and don't forget to buy the book.
Yes.
in early access. And well, I guess signing off.
Bye.
Bye.